That's why I get irritated with the latest revisionist behavior with Roald Dahl's books, for instance.
Yeah.
We must never, ever edit that material or anybody's material. You should allow people to be able to make a determination. If you do not like what's in a book, if you find that it uses offensive words, racial slurs, stop reading it. And if everybody else doesn't like it either, that book will not sell.
Tell us a bit about that. I read that recently as well, but just for people who aren't up to scratch. I mean, obviously, Roald Dahl is the children's writer, mostly children's writer, of Matilda and James and the Giant Peach and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But what's going on?
Well, the man was a genius. His ability to write those stories, and he led an interesting life. And if people only know him because of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, BFG, James and the Giant Peach, Matilda, etc., I'd encourage them to also read Flying Solo, which is a very interesting read about his life when he was in the RAF. And he was a so-and-so. There's no doubt about it. He loved seducing women, and he had some views of the time, as is now said, that viewed with retrospect might be that some people determine inappropriate. But the point is, the proof is always of the pudding is always in the eating. His books are sold by the millions. And, of course, one of the publishers has decided that they would utilize these sensitivity editors or sensitivity readers to come along and say, well, you can't really call people fat anymore, so we'll call them enormous. That's absolute nonsense. It's an adjective. So you're not saying, he doesn't write, because he's fat, he doesn't contribute anything to society and he's a scrounging benefits sponger. But rather he just describes Augustus Gloop as fat because he is. That's what he is. He's tubby. He's a lardy. Okay. So the publishers then have decided you can't use the word fat. You have to use enormous instead. That in Fantastic Mr. Fox, Bunce looks up at one of the other farmers, and because he's a pot-bellied dwarf, they have now expunged pot-bellied and dwarf because that's deemed to be offensive. And all you're left with is Bunce looked up. So it strips the book of its evocative descriptions. It's ridiculous. These individuals are exhibiting this sense of entitlement to tamper with somebody's original work. And it's outrageous. And it shows that they want to come along. And it is Orwellian. It's already started, this need to change things. Now, of course, they've witnessed the public backlash, and they've said that both versions of the books will be available, the censored and then, of course, this.
Right, so then you've got the choice. Do we go for the horrible one for our child or the nice censored one? Do you know what I mean? That now you're like the bad guy for buying the original.
Well, that's the view that some people have.
Yeah.
And, of course, let the majority decide. I think sure. You sell those books and you can see which one's the most popular. And then Ian Fleming has suffered it as well, as individuals come along and they want to revise what he has written. Again, he's writing it from at the time, I think, in the 1950s. So, for instance, if the N-word is used, it might be used in that context. But what's important to understand is that if you've got two functioning brain cells, you will recognize that these are works of fiction. And at the end of the day, if you don't like it, stop reading it. Thinking that you are entitled to tell other people what they should read and what they should think is a very slippery slope, which people have gone down already. And of course, behind part of this is some of my kind, because they believe that they have this righteous ability to prescribe what everybody else should be witnessing. And you get that minority, which is very vocal. And you then have a majority of individuals who are all sort of nervously looking at one another thinking, I don't think this is right. Do you? Oh, no, I better not say that because the Stasi will come and kick my door in the night. And it's the divide and conquer, of course. Now,
I think that Roald Dahl one is so egregious, isn't it?
It is. It's outrageous because it's not even taking out. It's not like it's a call to arms to sort of rise up and exterminate a particular race from the face of the earth, which, even though that might be viewed as reprehensible, if somebody wants to write in such terms, they should be allowed to, and everybody else can pass judgment on that by writing a counter book to it, or not even reading it, or burning the book in the streets, because you're allowed to do that as well. But the point is that you are tackling something which is a book that's written for children, which has delightful language, fantastic stories. There is a huge skill in being able to write like that many people perhaps don't quite appreciate. There really is. And to come along and tamper with it is, to my mind, disgusting.
Yeah, there's also a huge skill in teaching children to understand when something was written in a different time and that this would now be considered offensive. I mean, that's a huge opportunity to teach those children to say, hey, look, we're reading this bit and well, you shouldn't, don't try not to say that too often to people because it's not considered politically correct today or whatever it might be. That's a teaching moment, a teachable moment.
Yes, that's a fair point. I mean, I would certainly take issue with some of those teaching points and say, look, it's an adjective. You're just describing someone. Where are you going to stop with taking offence at the way that somebody is described? But
it's a different point, isn't it? I mean, so I guess the two that's a different point of contention that we could debate about, and I'd probably end up siding with you on that anyway. Mm-hmm. But just to start with, if there is something, Mark Twain, of course, Huckleberry Finn and the N-word and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, David Baddiel wrote an article about this with the Roald Dahl situation. He said Huckleberry, I think it was in his article, the Huckleberry Finn was first attacked by the right because of the mix of races and stuff that goes on in that book, and then by the left because of, and the same thing happened with Harry Potter. People, because of the witchcraft and all that stuff, it was attacked by the right and burning books and stuff, and then inevitably the left. And I just feel like the rest of us are just going, just leave it alone, you bunch of lunatics on both sides here. Just leave the book. And Roald Dahl, I mean, it's really not that offensive. It's really to change the book. I'm as shocked as you are. I'm flabbergasted. I really am flabbergasted that they actually went in and changed it. Yeah. That's and it's always the people who do it are the ones who should be most aware of the importance of books and words and not rewriting history and not, that kind of... Well,
it's important to understand, Andrew, that many of these individuals, and we can't say exclusively, but many of these individuals are actually operating from a narcissistic perspective because they believe that they have an absolute entitlement to do this. They're showing a sense of entitlement to behave in this manner. There's no accountability for their actions. There's an absence of emotional empathy for the impact that it has upon people. And they see it as their sort of righteous way of educating people. And invariably with these individuals, it's about, I believe in freedom of expression as long as it's my expression. And that narrow mindset you'll invariably find amongst our kind, not exclusively. And I'm not saying that just because somebody advocates these particular ways that means that they're a narcissist. But I've done a few videos recently about the origins of many of these things. And it starts with our kind because it's a means of asserting control over people. So in the same way, religion, what a brilliant device for controlling people. If you behave and do what I say and give me 1/10 of your income, you'll go to the nice place when you die. If you don't, you'll burn in hell. Oh, right, I better do what you tell me then. Whoa. So whoever thought of that? Now, of course, there are people that use religion in a way which isn't controlling, and they use it to enrich their lives. But there are a lot of people, and I've mentioned in my video, the holy narcissist. What better way of controlling somebody by saying that my imaginary powerful friend is going to rain down lightning bolts on your peasy ass if you don't do what I say? And so...
Who's the holy narcissist? God or the Pope or Jesus?
Oh, the clergy.
Oh, the clergy.
And of course you'll have lay members of the clergy as well that they will basically triangulate people with God or whichever God that they worship. But the origins of all of these things as a use of a method of controlling people comes from my kind, because we need that control. So whether it's brute force, whether it's creating a psychological device to control you, whether it's money and the markets, etc. So you'll see these sections of society and societal influences. Now, I've mentioned it recently about virtue signaling. That will have originated from my kind. I've talked about the cult of the selfie. That's originated from my kind. And then it bleeds into the mainstream, which makes it a lot easier for us to fit in because everybody thinks, oh, it's just a selfie. But if you break it down and examine what that represents and how it's used, it fits with the narcissistic dynamic.
Some of the virtue signaling, I mean, I think the same people who would be appalled by the language of Roald Dahl are now, I don't know if you've seen some of the videos going around about the drag acts for children. Have you seen that?
I read something about, were they not going and reading in a children's school or something, and people have got upset about that?
There were drag acts. There's like loads of, it's like gone viral. One particular, there's like kids and babies watching, and there's like these really provocative, like in your face strutting and pelvic things in children's faces of like drag acts going on.
Okay.
And it's that same side, you know, who would also be mortified at the word fat being in Roald Dahl.
Absolutely, and it comes back to the point that I made. I am entitled to express myself by thrusting my crotch into the face of a 5-year-old, but you're not allowed to say that I'm doing something wrong. Freedom of expression as long as it's my expression.
I keep thinking about outtakes that I could clip from this, and just your sentence of I'm allowed to thrust my face into a 5-year-old.
It's okay. My lawyer sat next to me, so I'd advise you to tread carefully.